These were like really well done. What would you guys do here? We're live? Keep going?
I was just trying to move it back.
Okay, so it is just past 7 o'clock. We'll call this meeting to order. So we're just wrapping up from a previous meeting here. And we'll get rocking. So we got the agenda in front of us. Is there any changes to the agenda? Going once, going twice. Right, okay. Any changes to the agenda?
Motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Okay, and on my own remiss there following our agenda because I am not used to it. I'd like to start this meeting by saying in the spirit of respect, authenticity, and reconciliation, the town of Slave Lake honors and acknowledges that we are situated on the traditional lands of the Sardis First Nation within Treaty 8 territory, home to Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples who have occupied these lands since time immemorial. We do have a motion on the floor to adopt the agenda as presented. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? That is carried. We'll then jump into minutes of our previous meeting, page 3 of our package for the regular meeting of council on June 7th. Any issues, changes? Councilor Hughes.
Make a motion to accept the regular council meeting of June 7th, 2022 as presented.
Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? That is carried. Next on page 9 of our package, we have the meeting minutes from June 21st. Any issues with those? Councilor Brandel.
I move that we accept the minutes of June 21st as presented.
Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? That is carried. Question period there. Open mic night, basically. CAO, do you have anything to add at the moment?
Listening. No, I'm good.
Okay. As he's still learning to use the mic, we probably should go easy on him here. Any questions from council? As I see none, we'll move on to reports of new business. So the first one is options for Fournier Place residential subdivision. And so I am currently not pursuing any work in Fournier Place, but it might be something I might be interested in the future. So I am going to step out. And I'll let Councillor Brandel take over.
I guess that is me. All right, Lori.
All right, your worship and members of council, the purpose of this report is for council to consider potential options regarding the future development of Fournier Place, as well as information regarding lot inventory, the Fournier Place design guidelines, and options with respect to variances. So just a little bit of history on it. Basically, right after the 2011 wildfire, we were in the process of trying to find a location for emergency housing. While we were in the throes of that, the province came along and said, we'll pay for and develop temporary parks at Sunset Place and Phoenix Heights. So then we shifted gears to a full-time mobile home subdivision with respect to design, hired a planning consultant, and the design guidelines were created. And then after that, they were adopted and registered on the titles of the lands by way of a restrictive covenant. In the process of marketing Fournier Place, the town went out for requests for proposals and advertised that the successful proponent would enter into an agreement with the company, with the town, and build and place mobile homes on the lots, and then finish the landscaping, driveway, and hard surfacing. The concept was turnkey starter homes within a price range that would be attainable for first home buyers. We only received one response to the RFP from Homes by Northplex, and they came back with a different proposal, which was modular and RTM structures and not mobile homes. So we entered into an agreement, accepted that proposal, and amended the design guidelines, changed the zoning, discharged caveats, re-registered new caveats, and so forth. At the time, the subdivision was empty and the town owned all the lots, so there were no objections with respect to any of that work that took place. So the new restrictive covenants with the amended design guidelines were then registered on the title. So a restricted covenant is a condition that restricts, limits, prohibits, or prevents the actions of someone in an enforceable agreement. Restrictive covenants often enforce a standard of uniformity across a development. They are enforceable on all the lands where they are registered, and this can make it difficult, obviously, then to change or remove them. Removing them can prove to be quite difficult, as well as the courts are hesitant to remove them. Basically, the restrictive covenant for Fournier Place ensures that the developments within that subdivision are constructed in accordance with the design guidelines that we have adopted. Removing and replacing the restrictive covenants on Fournier previously was time consuming and lengthy, however, was not hampered by notification or objections, as the town owned all the parcels. There are now 13 individual landowners who have bought into the subdivision with the restrictive covenant in place, and they must be consulted and agree to amending or removing the restrictive covenant. So if it's council's desire to completely remove the restrictive covenant, the planning department recommends seeking some legal advice with respect to issues that might arise and the probability of success rectifying those issues prior to proceeding. So the first little paragraph here on page 3 is on lot inventory. Fournier Place has 34 RPSL residential plan small lot parcels. Those are adjacent to 6th Ave and Caribou Trail Southwest, and there are 2 of those that are developed. And there are 60 R1D mobile home detached dwelling district parcels, of which 11 have been developed. So a good portion of the subdivision is still vacant. We also were asked to bring forward some potential options with respect to development of or future development of Fournier Place. And again, this would require restrictive covenants be amended or removed. So option 1, row house developments. Council asked administration to consider options to reduce the cost of developments within Fournier. Administration provided concept of rezoning the 18 lots adjacent to Caribou Trail Southwest from RPSL to R3 high density residential district to facilitate the construction of row housing. This would increase the density, thereby hopefully decreasing the cost per unit, or likely decreasing it. So row houses are defined as buildings consisting of 3 or more dwelling units joined in whole or in part at the sides only, with no dwelling being placed over another in whole or in part. Each is separated by a common wall, and each unit has separate individual and direct access to grade. The planning department reviewed the regulations of the R3 district and compared it to the Fournier lots, as well as the row house developments on 13th Street. And the purpose was just to get a sense of how large that development was in comparison to the Fournier lots, and how viable it would be to try to develop the same sort of development on those Fournier parcels. The Fournier lots are not as deep as the ones on 13th Street where the row houses are developed. And as such, considering a similar plan on that site, the building itself would need to be reduced in depth, or variances would be required to front and rear yard setbacks. And based on a total site area, Fournier would allow a density of 24 units. We felt it was difficult to get all 24 units in there based on the reduced depth of the subject lands. However, utilizing a 2-story floor plan. So dependent on the building plan, things could change there. We also note that below ground foundations are not permitted due to the high water table, and that further reduces the potential living area within the developments. So based on the potential site constraints and development, such as the concept provided to council during the strategic plan session, which was a 3-story development with a garage on the ground floor and living space on the 2nd and 3rd floors, I think would be a better option than trying to go with this 2-story model. This option also provides a better visual and noise barrier to separate the lower density developments within the subdivision from the industrial developments on the west side of Caribou Trail, and also increases in density should reduce the cost per unit. Another item for consideration here, and I'm just throwing this out, is servicing. Row houses are not developed with separate services to each lot or unit, but rather one single service is constructed with a vault meter. What this means is that each unit could not be separately serviced or separated by subdivision to create separate titles, because they're not separately serviced. As such, a condominium plan could be registered wherein the condominium association would own the common property and the individual landowners could purchase the individual units. This process would create separate titles for each unit. It's important to note that there are considerable costs and legal fees in the process of establishing condominiums. And finally, if this is a direction taken, the town would require proper abandonment of the existing services of the existing lots and construction of a new water and sanitary sewer service, rezoning and consolidation of all the parcels in question, and then finally, development of the condominium association. The second option would be semi-detached dwellings. Council asked administration to consider the concept of rezoning some of the R1D lots within the center of the subdivision around the park to R2 medium density residential district. If you constructed a semi-detached dwelling straddling lot boundaries between two parcels, existing services for each of these lots could be utilized for each unit of the dwelling. The R1D lots are wider than the RPSL lots, ranging from 14.6 to 18.9 meters in width. As such, these parcels could accommodate a larger footprint than the number of units would not increase, however, and there should be a marginal reduction in cost realized to build a semi-detached versus a detached dwelling. Originally, Fournier was designed and planned for R2 developments along 6th Ave. So the zoning lot dimensions and servicing is there for that. As such, it would not be an issue for those lots to switch to R2 as well. This option would require registration of subdivision plan, illustrating the location of the common wall on the property boundary and within the structure, as well as a concurrent registration of a party wall agreement. Also, amendments to the design guidelines and rezoning of the subject lands would be required for some of those in the center around the park. The third option was the consideration of mobile homes. Another option would be to allow placement of mobile homes within the subdivision. As the Fournier Place design guidelines were originally developed for a mobile home subdivision, there would be no issues ensuring mobile homes meet the design guidelines. Further, the lot dimensions were also designed for mobiles. Front and rear yard setbacks are less than those for a detached dwelling. And as such, there should be significantly fewer variances required or requested to accommodate these developments. Additionally, the town of Slave Lake has almost no inventory of mobile home lots, both in mobile home parks and mobile home subdivisions. The R1D mobile home detached dwelling district allows for mobile homes and detached dwellings. So an amendment to the land use bylaw would not be required. However, amendments to the design guidelines would. Finally, mobile homes often provide new home buyers with a home that costs less to get into than a standard detached dwelling. As far as affordability goes, a mobile home on a lot is cheaper to purchase than a house on a lot, or half of a semi-detached dwelling on a lot, and as such would meet with council's desire for more affordable housing options. This option would require amendments to the design guidelines to include mobile homes, as well as amendments to the sections regarding roof pitch and eaves. A rezoning amendment would not be required, again, as mobile homes are already listed in the R1D. And one final note, financing for mobile home developments can be challenging, and that often the bank requires a down payment for the mobile and a separate down payment for the land. And some financial institutions will not finance these developments at all. In the original marketing concept for Fournier, the town considered at length the constraints around financing this style of development and purposely requested proposals for turnkey mobile home developments to make it easier for first-time home buyers to get into this type of development. Any questions on that part? No? Okay, I'll move on to the Fournier Place design guidelines. Council also requested a brief overview of the design guidelines. This overview does not contain all the information within the design guidelines, however, does capture the most significant design criteria. So land uses are R1D, detached dwelling mobile home district, and RPSL residential plan small lot district. Architectural detailing and housing styles. It should be noted that the design guidelines were amended to reflect the various house styles and materials utilized by Homes by Northplex in the construction. At that time, they had 3 different house styles they offered. So what the guidelines say is that homes with identical front styles or exterior facades will not be located within, or will be located within every other lot to ensure identical styled homes are not situated next to each other. The balance of the exterior facade is to contain architectural features that complement the siding, verandas, bay or boxed windows, columns, windows, and door details. Gable treatments are all suggested as good examples of architectural features. Dwellings on corner lots that have a greater public visibility, i.e. the front and flanking side, should have architectural features that continue from the front to the flanking side. Roof pitch and material and eaves. This section reflects a 512 roof pitch that would be constructed with asphalt shingles. Eave dimensions is to be compatible with the style of dwelling. And siding, this section provides for fiber cement, hardboard, composite wood, and vinyl siding options. Colors and trim, this section just stipulates that there must be 3 assorted color options for 3 consecutive homes to ensure the same colors are not used on the houses that are next to each other. And there's a big array of colors, so it hasn't been difficult to meet that requirement either. Trim, storm, and screen door shutter colors shall complement the siding color. Tone on tone selections is what is recommended. There is a landscaping requirement, which is 1 tree of a variety approved by the town shall be installed in the front yard. In place of a tree, they may have a shrub and perennial bed instead. Garages and carports. Originally, the design guidelines offered a range of options from attached and detached garages and carports. To keep the developments in this subdivision at the preferred price point, attached garages will not likely be utilized. That said, the option to develop an attached garage remains within the guidelines for those larger parcels within the subdivision. There are a few that would be able to accommodate it. In addition, due to the size of the modulars and homes and the associated setbacks and parcel coverage, Northplex proposed a detached common wall garage. Common wall garages will be developed over the side property boundary, and a subdivision and party wall agreement is registered on title. Each lot with a common wall garage will have ownership of half the garage or 1 bay and will share a common wall with the adjacent property. Lighting, the design guidelines state trail lights within the subdivision will be of the same standard of style as used throughout the town's parks and trails and open spaces. Fencing, wood screen fence is contemplated in the design guidelines on the perimeter, and a 3-foot high black chain link fence is utilized to separate the R1D lots from the community common or the park in the center. The only amendment to the fence guideline regulations was within the subdivision was the color of stain and the type of wood. And instead of cedar with clear stain, we moved to treated lumber with white stain. With the concrete driveways and sidewalks, it's broom finished gray concrete, as well as a sidewalk from the front step to the driveway. And for lots fronting on the central park or in the community common, there's a sidewalk that goes from the dwelling to the community common as well. For the foundations, this portion of the design guidelines is consistent with the requirements of the geotechnical investigation conducted for this subdivision. So all homes are developed with engineered design screw piles. In addition, the crawl space is skirted and parged rather than the vinyl skirting that you see on mobile homes. So that's a very basic on the most onerous, if you could say it that way, design guidelines that have to be met within the subdivision. Options with respect to variances. So I have a few here to consider. During the strategic planning session held in November, there were concerns expressed regarding the variances and requirements for bungalow style homes on the R1D lots and the time that it took to process those. The history around this issue is that Fournier, as stated above, was originally designed for mobile homes. Front and rear yard setbacks for mobiles are less than those required for detached dwellings, and as such, the dimensions of the lots created easily accommodate mobile homes. However, variances are required for the single-family dwellings that were going in there, the houses. As we moved, we needed to relax front and side yard setbacks and rear yards in some cases. And most often there was variances required to parcel coverage. Currently, the development officer and the MPC have some variance power to handle some variance requests. However, most of the variances required for single-family dwellings were beyond those powers, which means that those requests had to be considered by the SDAB. To address the time constraint with respect to the variances that must be heard by the SDAB, we would like to offer a few options. Option one would be to increase variance authorities for both the development officer and the MPC. This would alleviate some of the requirement for SDAB hearings. The issue with this option, though, is that any variance granted in this section would apply to all land use districts within the land use bylaw, not just Fournier Place. This option does not require an amendment to the design guidelines, but would require an amendment to the land use bylaw. Second option is to create an overlay plan, which could provide reduced setbacks and parcel coverage regulations for lots within the overlay plan. We have not created an overlay plan, so this would be a new process. As such, we are unable to comment at this time as to how much time it would take and what might be required in reference to putting together an overlay plan. And it may also require an amendment to the design guidelines, but I'm not sure yet until we dig into that one a little bit more. The third option would be to create an entirely new land use district for Fournier Place with a reduced setback and parcel coverage regulations. This option would include the creation of a new land use district with regulations and an amendment to the land use bylaw to add the district, a redistricting amendment to rezone the lands to the new district, and then would also require an amendment to the design guidelines to include the new land use district. That's all of it. Any questions on any of that?
All right, questions from council? Councilor Ferguson?
So I think it's clear that we need to do something with Fournier Place, and I struggle with what the right course of action is. But I do have a question for you here, Lori. What of the options do you think gives us the greatest flexibility to do something without adversely affecting the overall current design and the current design guidelines?
I think the increasing the R2 developments. So more R2 on 6th Ave and maybe in the central area would be relatively easy. And I think mobile home placements would be, because it was designed for that, would be easy as well. The bigger or the harder ones to deal with would be the R3 developments.
Yeah.
But any of them, as you already know, would require us to get consent from the 13 landowners.
So any of the mobile homes that would go in there because of the design guidelines would have to look like the current buildings do in there or have a resemblance to them, correct?
Yeah, and if you looked at the original design guidelines, there's not much difference between where they were and where they went to accommodate the RTM and modular style dwellings. So they're like, I could pull out a historical copy, but there wasn't a whole lot of difference. So on the exterior, they wouldn't look a whole lot different. It would be very difficult to actually probably to pick out which one would be modular or versus which one is a mobile home.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I have a couple.
Sure.
So you said there's 60 mobile homes. lots,
The
right?
R1D lots, yes.
Yeah. So I do agree with you that it is huge in both the town of Slave Lake and the MD, that there are no lots that you can put a mobile on.
It's true. Yeah.
So it's very limiting in our whole entire area. So it would be nice to have some. I think 60 might be overkill. I know, I'm not sure the will of this council, but the previous council wanted to stay away from mobiles because they didn't want another trailer court because we've already got two in town. But I do think that there is a need for some mobiles. So I'd like to see some for sure. But I think 60 would be overkill.
We could definitely take, sections and dedicate those for mobile home placements.
It would be the easiest, right? Because that's
Yeah.
what they were, yeah. Question though, on the, when we were bringing the RTMs in and we had to do all the variances because they had bigger lot coverage, can you still put them, the garages, would they still have to be duplex garages on the mobile lots?
They don't have to be, and a lot of the lots can accommodate it. And the reason why is when the subdivision was designed and the streetlights and the pedestals and stuff went in, they ended up in the wrong placement because we'd never designed a common wall garage, right?
Remember that, yeah.
So there's a number of lots in there that cannot have a common wall garage because of the placement of the street furniture, so to speak. The other issue is if you move to a mobile home development, your front and your rear yard setbacks are less. So your development is out further on the front yard setback. It's not 25 feet. So there wouldn't be room on the ones with the mobile homes if you were to go in that direction for a common wall garage.
Okay,
Yeah, the other thing for consideration as well is that the fronts of the buildings won't line up on the streetscape. So you may want to dedicate then lots around the park and the community common because there are no dwellings there already. And then the streetscape, the facades will line up with the front of the homes. If you try to put them intermittently in between the ones on the outside periphery, you're going to have houses that are set back farther than mobile homes.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So, question on the design guidelines. Why is it frowned upon to have identical front styles together?
I think it was meant to do was try to give the subdivision more character so that you don't have like the cookie cut format you have. So then if it's every third house, then it doesn't give you that look like everything on this block looks exactly the same.
Okay,
I think that was all. And we haven't had any issue in terms of trying to meet that design guidelines.
well, putting on my realtor hat, I did have lots of
You did?
pushback on that.
Okay.
People thought that was ludicrous and like, who cares if like my house looks like the neighbor's house kind of thing.
Okay. Well, that was the intent of that, was
Yeah.
just so that it didn't look like a cookie cutter subdivision and it had more architectural style.
And then, so are you looking for council's feedback on option 1, 2, and 3, or?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess maybe you need time to digest it. I'm not sure if you just want to accept the report and think about it some more or where you want to go from here.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, Councilor Ferguson.
Oh, it was just about, you talked about mobile houses and there's mobile housing on there right now, but they're made to look like homes. That's correct, right?
No,
No.
they're all modular or
Yeah,
RTM.
modular, yes.
Okay, there's a common misconception. I deal with this one all the time. A modular home is not a mobile home. A mobile home by our definition and by Alberta safety codes has a frame, a metal frame under it.
Okay,
So there's either mobile homes, which have the metal frame, and then the rest are detached dwellings, and whether they're come in modules or 2 units, they're ready to move one piece or they're stick built on site.
And the roof pitch had to look like a house too in this subdivision, did it
Yeah.
not?
Well, they weren't exactly the same. I did indicate that if we were to move back to some mobile home developments, that we'd have to accommodate, it's a lower slope roof pitch. So it's not the same 512 pitch.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
More of a house than a.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's not that flat roof, that's for sure, but it's a lower pitch.
Mhm.
Yeah.
thank you for the clarification.
Personally, my preference would be option 3 is just to create a new land use district and start from scratch. And then we can kind of do whatever we want.
Yeah, I agree. The only
My 2
thing, I
cents.
think before we can do any of these options, we'd have to go out to the existing owners of the properties and see if they're interested in.
So is that unanimous consent to?
Yes, it
do
is.
These, not majority?
Yeah, and only has to be one person within the subdivision who doesn't agree. And there's not, because they bought in to the subdivision with the restrictive covenant in place, they're protected by that restrictive covenant. And if they don't want it removed or amended, there's not anything we can do.
Okay, good to know.
So is this something we can approach landowner, like, can that be the, I don't know what we can do here. Can that be the next step is what I'm
Yeah,
looking
the next
for?
step could be, if council wants, is we could go out with some correspondence letters to each of those landowners and get some indication of how they feel about amending or removing. And we could talk about this, the
I
different
think that would be,
options.
in my opinion, that would be better because if you've got 50% saying outright no, or if we have
One.
all yes or one no, at least we've got a better indication of
How people feel.
how people
Yeah,
feel and how, how much
Ours.
public engagement is needed before we choose something else.
Or
Yeah.
even invite them to council and have like an.
Or,
open
yeah, if there's
meeting
only
like we did
13.
with Loriland a couple years ago.
Yeah, well,
I would like to see us engage with the residents before I felt comfortable making
Making a
any
decision.
indication of the way forward. I would rather talk to them and kind of chew on this a little bit more.
yeah, no, I agree. That's exactly the way I was thinking as well, because we could do a whole lot of work. And
That
at the
as
end of the
well.
day, not
Yeah.
get the consensus anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to see some type of either letter or meeting with the landowners so that we can talk about what options. Because I think in their interest, they also, from what I've heard, want more development in there, but it's staging that development in a way that's going to keep the people who bought in initially happy, as
Yeah.
well as provide some options, since those lots aren't moving.
Is this something we can do now as well? Like, is there going to be a delay on this? Can we engage with these residents in the coming weeks, or what would a timeline be per se?
I just need to send them a letter. I mean, unless you want me to investigate additional options in the event that they, let's say they're receptive and they're wanting to move forward. Are there other things you want us to consider? Or you like what you have in front of you? Because I don't really want to engage them and get them,
Get their hopes up or.
yeah, and then
or
we
get them
decide
riled up, yeah.
there's something else we want to look at. So I
I don't know what else we'd look at.
don't know either.
So maybe just one suggestion, if we're moving towards a consultation or an open house sort of setup. Summer's kind of a busy time with holidays, both for residents and administration. Maybe if you, suggestion might be a motion to direct administration to schedule an open house, in August, or gives us a little bit of time to prepare and,
Or even September.
simplify kind of some of the options.
Or
and-
even September, like, yeah,
Yeah.
ideally, in my mind, you'd have correspondence that went out ahead of time and then have a meeting later on.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just don't want to see it fall off the wayside and then we revisit this again in another 6 months as we have the need for housing now.
Agreed. Yeah.
That's all. So
I personally, I like the idea of inviting them for a meeting and then we can have that face-to-face conversation and sometimes a letter just gets thrown away, so.
Do you want me to outline anything other than just an invite to discuss? Would you like to leave that till we get into the open house? General purpose and that's it? Okay,
Yeah. Just open the door, peek in the box.
okay. And we're looking for some time in September.
Ideally, I think that would probably be better.
Okay, I will figure out a timeline and then I'll ensure that I won't send the letters out much more than about 3 weeks ahead of time. Because otherwise
It would get forgotten.
it will get forgotten. Okay,
Okay,
Who's making that motion?
good question. I guess you are.
Sure.
All right, so motion that we task administration to engage the residents. By Councilor Ferguson. Any other discussion? All the question, all in favor? That's carried.
great, thank you.
And then we need a motion to accept his information as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Thank you. All in favor? And carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
Alrighty. The purpose of the report I have before you tonight is just to get approval to transfer funds out of our operating account into our investment account. Earlier on in the year, the town sold the old fire hall building. We have since received all of the proceeds of these funds. And now instead of just leaving it in the operating account, we're seeking to just invest them in our RBC Dominion Securities. And we'll discuss whether a bond or a GIC at this point in time is the appropriate place to put those funds.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Councillor Ferguson,
Sounds pretty straightforward to me, so I'll make a motion.
feel free.
And be resolved that council approve the transfer of funds in the amount of 950,000 to be transferred from Town of Slave Lake Royal Bank operating account to the Town of Slave Lake Royal Bank Dominion Securities account to be invested.
Any discussion? Call the questions in favor. That is carried. Next, public art policy, Jill.
Evening. So the purpose of the report tonight is to discuss the public art policy and request for funding for the mural project that came from the Arts Council. So at the June 14th council meeting, the Arts Council came to request funding for a series of murals to be placed around town, as well as a public art policy. So we've carried out some research on public art policies and mural projects in other municipalities. Our research was done on communities of Town of Stony Plain, City of Lacombe, City of Edmonton, and City of Grand Prairie, sorry. Based on the research, we have developed a proposed policy and procedures outlining funding and a process for public art, including murals. So funding, many other communities look at dedicating a percentage of capital budget towards public art. So while this allows public art to be considered as part of a project, there are budget allocation challenges that this may create. So that includes some of the challenges the main challenges, increasing the cost of the projects in the capital projects. And so art may not be covered by capital funding sources, so that could lead to a proportional tax increase. Most communities that do look at this model range fund public art through a percentage that ranges from 0.1% to 1% of their capital or of their municipal budget. And so other municipalities have indicated that they make budget considerations annually for public art. Our recommendation would be that public art is considered in future operating budgets, which would allow us to debate would allow us to look at the operating budgets each year and deliberate as to what we want to allocate. So public art reserve is also something that other municipalities have established. This allows funds to be carried year to year if they're not spent. We do have a community services reserve that's generally for facility renewal. We could put unused portions from a public art fund into this reserve. We just have to make sure that we're tracking it so that we know that that money is allocated towards public art as opposed to facility renewal. The Arts Council did indicate that they would like funding for murals, a mural or murals this year, with funding of up to $13,000 per mural. Currently, we don't have money allocated in the 2022 operating or capital budget. So therefore, the funds would need to be drawn from the future expenditures reserve if we wanted to do a grant this year. As far as procedures go, some municipalities have established a committee who then direct the procurement of public art. It's our recommendation that community services be responsible for this program. Where funding is granted to another party, so for example, the Arts Council, an agreement would be put in place outlining the conditions and the details of this project. We've also written the policy so that the procurement of art could come from community services should the opportunity arise. So often we have granting opportunities like the mural mosaic that's at the MRC, things like that present themselves where they want to have matching funds. So say we didn't have a request from an external group that year, that would also allow community services to look at the procurement of public art. We looked at the installation of public art. So some communities do stipulate that murals or public art need to be installed a certain way, which can add to the cost. at this point, we're not recommending that. So they had some murals that have to be installed on panels. I think adds about $10,000 to the cost. Arts Council is just looking at painting the side of the building, and we don't have any issues with that. Then as far as content goes, some communities have a committee that reviews proposed artwork. Our proposed policy has placed responsibility on the CAO or designate. And so because of this, we could also establish a committee process should we think that that's appropriate. Permits, so again, some communities request a development permit for public art. We're not requesting this currently, as long as the art doesn't create a new structure or development, as a mural would not. We would establish just an agreement between the town and those to who funding is granted. So we've presented a few options to council there. So as far as funding, looking at funding the current request through the future expenditures reserve, considering funding during budget deliberations, establishing a policy requiring amount equivalent percentage of capital projects, establish a public art reserve fund as well, or remain status quo. And then also adopt the policy that's proposed, amend the proposed policy, or remain status quo.
Okay, questions, comments from council? You guys just talking about the last one or no?
I can comment.
Okay, Councilor Graham.
I'm in agreement with this. I think it's great to kind of give our admin the overview of they could approve some stuff, but they don't have to get too dirty and perform the task. So obviously Jillian's said her department's ready to take that on. And I think for $13,000 to kind of beautify our town, pure mural, it's a good thing.
Other comments, Councilor Hughes?
I know that sometimes there are capacity restraints within your department. Do you foresee this being a huge task that you require extra hours or budget for or anything like that?
Not at this point, no. I would treat it as, so the way I would look at doing it is similar to how we do the FCSS grants, is do a call for proposal by a certain point in time. At this point, we haven't had any interest besides the Arts Council, but we also wanted to keep it open, say that another group in the community was established, so then it would just have to be. And so currently the CAO is the person that makes the decision on the content, or else delegates it to someone. So if it was something that all of a sudden we had a whole ton of people that were interested, my recommendation, because the CAO could designate something, we may have to look at a committee process, but currently I don't see that it's going to be a huge time constraint, but as it grows, it may, but then we'll look at that. And hopefully by that point, our capacity issues are solved and we're fully staffed. So,
okay.
Councilor Brandel.
So your motion tonight is just for $13,000 per mural for this year, right? Not on an ongoing basis?
Yes, just for this year, yes. And then it would be
Then-
something that when we head into the 2023 budget discussions, that we look at how much we want to allocate.
Okay, perfect.
Councilor Ward.
I also want to say that I do like the idea of putting this forward, especially for our downtown area, because I think I always like the murals that obviously have aged over time. I really like that there's a policy in place as well. And I think the ability to grant other organizations grant Arts Council, whoever it is, for the maintenance and obviously creation of that is really smart. So for me, I would approve the current funding request and also the policy.
Okay. It sounds like a lot of people in favor, so I'd entertain a motion at this point. Councilor Hughes.
Be resolved that council approve the public art policy.
You want two motions here? I think one would work. That's fine.
Okay, and that council approves granting the Slave Lake Regional Arts Council up to $13,000 per mural for up to 2 mural projects in 2022 to be funded from the future expenditures reserve.
Question. I missed the last presentation, but I did meet with this group before they came, so I had an idea what they were doing. Totally support. No issues. I think it's great to see some more investment, especially they're talking about downtown, which totally works with the theme that we're going. But the way this is worded, it's 13,000 per mural for up to 2 mural projects. So are we talking 26,000 then?
Yes.
They only had currently one at the time, so maybe this has changed, but at the time they came to present, they only had one building committed. So they were still in the process of that. So we just wanted to specify that it's per mural project. So if they just get permission from the one building owner, they'll get $13,000. They're not going to get like a 26,000 for one mural is why we want to specify it there.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Just want to be clear in the motion.
Yeah,
what
no,
we're
for sure.
approving. Okay, there's no further discussion. Call the question. Those in favor? That is carried. Okay, so we will jump into Mayor's Corner real quick. Jill, before you run out, I just want to say thanks to our town staff for another great job on Canada Day. Lots of good feedback from people on that. And then, of course, having to play with the weather and having to adapt indoors, and we appreciate it very much. Congrats to Vanderbilt Contractors. They're hosting an event tomorrow that some of council, I think, is going to for planting 100 million trees. That's pretty significant all on its own. So congratulations to them. Council saw a really great presentation from Voyant. Our CAO administered here this afternoon. This will come back to a future council meeting, but it's basically some online technology and software, like a digital platform for us to engage with our residents, get messages out. We did try an app in the past with the town, and it wasn't, didn't have a lot of uptake, but I think this one would be very easy for us to use and administer, and can see a huge potential benefit there. So excited to see that one come forward. I want to say thanks to our volunteers in our community. I feel like some of them are taking a beating this week. You know, I always love the fact that there's a lot of, you know, I always struggle with Slave Lake. We're such a new community. We're only 50 years old. And everybody talks about this nostalgia that they used to have from 20 years ago. I think it's great to have that, but things do have to change, and things are as strong as the amount of people that are putting the time and effort into them. So our community succeeds because people put in time and effort, and things like the motocross track were big, and then they kind of went away, and all of a sudden we have a passionate group and they're coming back. And things will evolve and ebb and flow, and Sandcastle was big in the day, and then it kind of went away, and maybe in the future it'll be big again. So I just want to say thanks to all of the community members, all the volunteers, all the organizations that make this a spectacular and wonderful place to live, because I feel like some of them are needing to hear that this week. Additionally, which is probably even bigger news than all of that, Stanley Cup was just won here shortly. And so I will revert to our official hockey guru, Councillor Gramlich, for some additional words.
Yeah, I've traded in my blue and orange tonight for blue and maroon, which is very rare, but I thought it was pretty unique. Only 1,331 people have ever had their name engraved on the Stanley Cup as a player. And now one of them is born in Slave Lake. So Nicholas Obey-Kubel, congratulations to you and your family. His father Doug still resides here, and Nick spends tons of time here in the summer and Christmases. So just a big shout out to him and his teammates and his family. Congratulations.
Very exciting. Congrats. With that, we do have some closed session pieces, and we will jump into that. Motion to go in closed session. Thank you, Councillor Ward. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? That is carried.